Chapter 9 On Equality. Since I believe egalitarianism currently serves as the primary rational foundation of the morality of many individuals today, and that it is significantly at odds with the production of capital, I will make the best case I can against most aspects of egalitarianism. I will argue that egalitarianism has served as a decent moral theory for society at large, but fails in general by providing poor answers to many situations, especially for the individual, leading to conclusions that I doubt many of us want. There are many existing critiques of egalitarianism already, so rather than repeat those critiques, I will instead show here the comparison between outcomes from the production of capital and egalitarian outcomes, and leave it to you to decide which outcomes are more preferable, to both yourself as an individual and to that of society of all individuals. For the sake of my argument outlined here, I will define egalitarianism as the moral imperative towards equality among human beings. This could be equality of rights, equality of suffrage, equality of benefits, equality of wealth and capital, equality of income, equality of health, equality of outcomes, equality of pleasure and happiness, equality of opportunities, equality of taxation, equality under the law, and so on. Of course, a never-ending debate and difficulty of egalitarianism is which of these aspects is to be equal. I'm sure many would oppose differences in suffrage based on egalitarian principles, but then be quickly tolerant of differences in how much people should pay in taxes based on differences in a person's nature and wealth. As seen in the nature of capital, definitively, property rights and the production of capital creates inequality in the ownership of capital. Absent of theft and charity, those who produce capital will acquire capital, and those who do not produce capital will be devoid of it. Since we are all different by nature, inequality is a natural outcome of property rights due to our differences in productivity. So, we come to realize a moral impasse between property rights and equality. Which is better, property rights or equality? Are we willing to sacrifice equality for the sake of property rights? Or are we willing to sacrifice property rights for the sake of equality? As proposed in the political structure of capital, if indeed property rights granted to productive beings is the best structure to the production of capital within society, then sacrificing property rights for the sake of equality will reduce or reverse the production of capital. As such, it is a choice between more capital or more equality. Which is better, more capital or more equality? How much equality are we willing to sacrifice for capital? Or how much capital are we willing to sacrifice for equality? The production of capital is indifferent to inequality, insofar that such inequalities do not destroy capital on the whole of society. The production of capital posits that less equality is justified if more capital is produced, in contrast to an egalitarian, where instead less capital is justified if more equality is produced. Of course, in understanding what capital is, that it is a quantification of all material property and human life, to sacrifice capital for the sake of equality, then, is to sacrifice property and human life for the sake of equality. So, which is better, life or equality of life, property or equality of property? How much of these desirable aspects, such as capital, life, property, happiness, pleasure, freedom, rights, and technology, are we willing to sacrifice in society for equality of such aspects among individuals? Unfortunately, egalitarianism fails to address the value to society of the very aspect that is to be equal. As such, egalitarianism is willing to sacrifice such aspects on the whole of society for the sake of the aspect's equality among individuals. However, no one would be willing to sacrifice all or nearly all of life and property to achieve perfect equality, right? Is a society of 1 billion unequal people better or worse than a society of 1 million equal people? Is a society of $100 trillion in wealth unequally owned better or worse than a society of $100 billion in wealth equally owned. In the case of a society of $100 billion in wealth, is it then immoral to create $99.9 trillion in wealth if it is unequally owned? In the case of a society of 1 million equal people, is it then immoral to create 999 million unequal people? If the more equal position is better, then just keep going in terms of less and less life or property for more and more equality until there exists little or no life or property at all. Clearly, the most equality is achieved when there exists only one person, because at that point, all people in society are exactly equivalent, and all property is equally owned. The moral choice then is to choose between either an unequal existence of life and property or its non-existence. Would we prefer to have property, albeit unequally owned, or no property at all? Would we prefer to have life, albeit unequal to others, or no life at all? For good or for worse, inequality of life and property is a necessary condition to the production of life and property, the production of capital. Why must this be? Because we are all different. By our nature as human beings, derived from our different biology, upbringing, and individual choices, we are all unique, and as such, unique in our productive capacities. Some produce capital, some consume capital, and some destroy capital. To transfer capital from those who are productive to those who are not will simply destroy it, while conversely, capital allocated to those who are productive will instead grow and produce it. Property rights serve as the mechanism of allocating property to those who are productive by giving them ownership of the property they create. Property rights granted to productive entities has made possible the production of much of the property, technology, and human life in existence today. The natural state of the existence of capital, the existence of life and property, is its unequal distribution, and because we are all different by nature, such an unequal distribution is its most productive one. Such is the cost of having a society of life and property. To pursue this point, let's look at egalitarianism from an individual perspective rather than a societal one. Individually, if we're an egalitarian, how much do we try to help ourselves and people we know before helping all other human beings equally? An egalitarian may make the ironic, but true, argument that in order to help others, they must first help themselves. But when do we stop helping ourselves before we help others? Let's imagine we had $1 million in savings. We could choose to equally distribute that $1 million across all human beings now, or we could choose to instead invest that savings, growing it at 5.49% annually, and end up with $2 million in savings in 13 years, to then distribute equally among human beings. What is the more egalitarian choice? Is more capital to distribute better? But in order to produce more capital, we had to hold on to that capital for 13 years rather than distribute it. Of course, we could keep going and end up with $4 million in savings in 26 years and $8 million in savings in 39 years. As an egalitarian, when should we stop? Or should we even begin? Perhaps rather than invest our capital once we receive it, should it be instantly distributed? Should this proposition be true of all our capital, even our own body? That once we acquire our own body, perhaps we should create a contractual arrangement with all the people in the world where everyone gets one vote on how we should direct our own actions? To direct what food we should eat, what education we should pursue, what job we should take, what relationships we would have? Is this outcome, an egalitarian but arguably self-destructive situation, desirable? I think we would agree, no. The production of capital conversely posits to indeed invest our capital in that which best grows it within society, regardless of how it is equally or unequally distributed. To use our understanding of nature to discriminate among all possible investments and distribute our capital as productively as possible. To not distribute it indiscriminately or equally, since such distributions and investments would squander our capital rather than to grow and produce it. If we believe that investing our capital in an S&P 500 mutual fund is our best opportunity to grow capital, then do so. Or if investing our capital in a higher education, enabling us to create more valuable labor, is our best opportunity to grow capital, then do so. Or if investing our capital in a new business that we manage is our best opportunity to grow capital, then do so. Or if investing our capital in a family to raise productive human beings into the future best grows capital, then do so. Or if giving our capital to a charity that focuses on sponsoring the education of children to become productive human beings best grows capital, then do so. Or if giving our capital to an organization focused on the research of new forms of medicine and treatments to prolong the productive lifespans of human beings best grows capital, then do so. Of course, we should not just be wishful thinkers when it comes to such investments, but experts. To truly evaluate the potential for success of such investments and know, not just hope, that such investments will be fruitful. This knowledge of potential investments is what can explain and justify the unequal diversity of investments seen within society. We each have our own unique, correct or flawed, understanding of nature, allowing us to make our own individual and unique assessment of the choices and investments we make, choosing those investments that we personally believe will be the most productive. Our success in making the proper investments is validation of our knowledge and mastery of nature, and our failures, validation of our ignorance and inability. Remember, the success of an idea, project, or investment isn't simply a function of how much capital it receives, but the knowledge and abilities of those who manage and execute it, which we are all different in. Given the same amount of capital, a musician is going to be more successful in composing music than a civil engineer, and a civil engineer is going to be more successful in constructing a bridge than a musician. A criminal is prone to the destruction of capital, and a child is prone to the spoilage of capital. A productive individual is going to be more successful in growing capital than an unproductive one. Because of the different productive natures of human beings, should they not be treated differently? However, as an egalitarian, should we not treat criminals and children the same as productive human beings, to have the same rights and sovereignty, and not to be told what to do by others? Also, as an egalitarian, if we can't argue for moral differences among human beings, differences of a person's nature that would justify differences in, say, the ownership of property or the degree of suffrage and taxation, then how can we argue for moral differences among ourselves? How can we aim to improve ourselves as a human being, such as acquiring education, ambition, tolerance, caring, and productivity, if such aspects of our nature can't be claimed as morally better from one person to another? As an egalitarian, we should be indifferent to how educated, ambitious, tolerant, caring, or productive we are, since we are indifferent to such aspects of other persons' natures. However, do you not aspire to be like your mentors and heroes because of their superior traits and nature? Do you not admire them rather than hate them because of such superior nature? If you're egalitarian, is such admiration immoral? Just as an egalitarian individual would have these self-destructive imperatives, an egalitarian society is likewise faced with such self-destructive imperatives. However, given the destructive outcomes of egalitarianism to society, why does it resonate with so much of us? Why do we desire to be equal to others? Why do we desire others to be equal to all others? Probably the most compelling argument for egalitarianism, for many individuals, is that it appeals to our nature as human beings. For good or for worse of society, We desire equality when it benefits us individually. We desire to have what others have, and equality suggests that it should be redistributed to us if we don't have it. Equality can serve as a means to attaining those things that we want. Envy and jealousy are in our nature as human beings, regardless if we are an egalitarian or wish to produce capital. However, where envy and jealousy motivate an egalitarian to redistribute things they want, regardless of the loss of such things to others, conversely, envy and jealousy motivate one who wishes to produce capital to instead create those things they want rather than to take such things from others, since their creation adds to the whole of society. However, given these difficulties of egalitarianism has indeed served as a societal moral breakthrough as compared to previous moral theories. With regards to the production of capital, this moral breakthrough includes the concept of sovereignty resting in the people. Sovereignty should not rest in governments, kings, or masters of violence, but instead, sovereignty should rest in the very people who support such entities and society as a whole. Without the people to support and fund government and the rule of law, it would not exist. Egalitarianism has thusly served as a moral principle in placing sovereignty back in the hands of those individuals that create and sponsor that very society to be sovereign over. Of course, where egalitarianism places everyone with an equal amount of sovereignty over government, the production of capital conversely places everyone with sovereignty in proportion to the degree of sponsorship of government, their taxation. By simply giving sovereignty equally to all within society, egalitarianism got close to this principle, since all the sponsorship of government rests in the hands of the people. Of course, however, it is unequally so. The production of capital conversely posits that sovereignty rests in productivity, that we are sovereign over that which we create and provide for, principally our body, our property, our charity, our family, and our taxation to government. Suffrage is the manifestation of political sovereignty, where suffrage in proportion to taxation, which is in proportion to capital, is the natural extension of property rights within society, resulting in the most productive political structure, as argued in the prior chapter on a political structure of capital. Another concept of egalitarianism that does help with the production of capital is equality under the law. No one is exempt from the law as it is agreed to, and the law applies equally to all. This goes hand in hand with the rule of law. It is quite important for individuals to know the rules of society so that they can calculate what are the most productive actions to take under the constraints of such rules. However, a distinction must be made that while the application and enforcement of the law should be equal, the law itself as legislated may very well be unequal. Such is the common case for different amounts of taxes to be paid or welfare to be received based on different amounts of income and wealth, as well as the common case of restrictions or admittances based on age. Just as a contract may apply differently and unequal benefits, penalties, and conditions to the different signees, since the signees agreed to the contract, it is fair to them. Such is the basis of law needing the approval of the constituents of society via suffrage before it can be enforced. To conclude, when we evaluate egalitarianism, there are definitely some good applications, but there are definitely some bad applications as well. Such bad applications are ultimately destructive to society because ultimate equality is at odds with the existence and production of life and property. We as individuals and as society must choose between either more equality or more life and property. I argue that while there may be some reasonable justifications for the application of egalitarianism, its primary motivation stems from individual self-fulfillment at the expense of society. Conversely, the production of capital is a way to achieve self-fulfillment while adding to society rather than taking from it.